AITA, for refusing to give my seat to a pregnant woman on a crowded bus. I never thought something as simple as sitting on a bus could turn into one of the most humiliating experiences of my life. But that's exactly what happened last Tuesday, the day I got labeled as heartless by a crowd of strangers and started doubting whether I'd really done something wrong. I, 28F, work long shifts at a hospital as a nurse. It's not some cushy desk job. It's constant walking, running, lifting, and being on my feet for hours without a break. On most days, I leave home before sunrise and come back after dark. I love my job, but it's physically draining. That day, my shift had been brutal. One of my patients had gone into cardiac arrest during rounds, and I'd spent hours assisting the doctors and handling family members' breakdowns. I hadn't eaten lunch. I'd barely drunk any water, and by the time my shift ended, I was running on fumes. So when I finally boarded the bus home, I grabbed the last empty seat near the middle and collapsed into it. My feet throbbed, my back ached, and my head was pounding. I remember thinking, if I don't sit down now, I might literally faint. About 2 stops later, a pregnant woman got on. She looked to be in her late 20s or early 30s, and yeah, she was very visibly pregnant. The bus was packed at that point, and people immediately looked around awkwardly, as if waiting for someone to offer her a seat. When nobody did, her eyes landed on me. She smiled politely at first, kind of expectantly, the way you do, when you're sure someone will stand up for you. But I didn't. I just stayed seated and looked down at my phone. My legs were trembling, my body screaming for rest, and I honestly couldn't bring myself to move. She stood there for a moment, holding onto the rail, then said loudly enough for others to hear, "Excuse me, could you please let me sit? I'm pregnant." I froze. Everyone's eyes turned toward me. The man sitting across from me even raised his eyebrows like, well? I wanted to explain, to tell them that I'd just worked a 14-hour shift saving lives, that I had chronic anemia, that standing for another 30 minutes might make me pass out, but I knew it wouldn't matter. They'd just see a young, healthy-looking woman refusing to stand for someone who clearly needed it. So I said quietly, "I'm really sorry, but I can't stand right now." Her smile disappeared. "Seriously?" she snapped. "You can't even give up your seat for a pregnant woman?" I felt heat rush to my face. I tried to speak again, but before I could, an older woman near the front yelled, "Unbelievable. Back in my day, people had manners." Others muttered in agreement, and I could feel the weight of every pair of eyes on me, judging, disapproving, disgusted. Then, to make things worse, a middle-aged man stood up dramatically and gestured toward his seat. "Here, ma'am," he said to the pregnant woman, glaring at me. Some of us still have empathy. The pregnant woman sat down with a satisfied huff and gave me a look that made me want to disappear. I spent the rest of the ride staring out the window, blinking back tears. When I got off the bus, a few people actually clapped for the guy who gave up his seat, like I was the villain in some public morality play. When I got home, I told my roommate what happened. She was shocked that I hadn't just given up the seat. "Come on," she said. "She's pregnant. That automatically makes her the priority. Even if you were tired, you should have stood up." I told her about my shift, my aching legs, my low iron levels, everything. But she just shook her head and said, "Yeah, but no one on the bus knew that. You looked fine. So of course they'd think you were being selfish." That's what really got me thinking. Because she was right, no one knew. And I guess that's the whole problem. People assume they can see who's struggling just by looking. They see a pregnant woman and think she must be suffering. But they don't see the exhausted nurse who just spent all day taking care of people like her. The next morning, I checked social media out of habit, and to my horror, the story had somehow made it to a local Facebook community page. Someone had posted, "To the woman on bus number 43 yesterday who refused to give her seat to a heavily pregnant passenger, you're the reason society is going downhill. Shame on you." There was a photo attached. Blurry but still recognizable as me. My scrubs, my bag, even my hair tied up in a messy bun. The comments section was brutal. Heartless. Disgusting. She doesn't deserve to work in healthcare. Someone even tagged my hospital's official account and demanded I be fired. I spent the entire day terrified that my boss would see it. Thankfully, no one from work mentioned it, but I deleted my social media accounts after that. The anxiety was eating me alive. Here's the thing, I get it. I do. Pregnant women go through a lot, and they deserve consideration and support. But I can't help but feel like the outrage that day wasn't really about her needing a seat. It was about public perception, about people wanting to feel morally superior by ganging up on someone. It wasn't kindness. It was performative empathy, the kind that only exists when there's an audience. A few days later, something ironic happened. On my day off, I was waiting in line at a pharmacy when I noticed a pregnant woman behind me, struggling to carry some bags. I immediately offered to let her go ahead of me. She smiled gratefully and said, "Thank you. That's so sweet." And I realized I wasn't against helping people. I never was. I just needed people to understand that sometimes the person who looks fine is actually hanging on by a thread. Still, that moment on the bus haunts me. I can't stop thinking about the looks, the whispers, and the humiliation. Maybe I should have just stood up. Maybe avoiding that entire scene would have been worth the pain. But then again, maybe this is exactly the problem. We've built a world where people are shamed for quietly taking care of themselves.
So, T.
Elmi, AITA for refusing to give my seat to a pregnant woman, even though I was exhausted and in pain after a 14-hour hospital shift?